Today is day 306 of the October 7th war and the Hamas hostage crisis. Iran was again found targeting their real enemy, America. 2 weeks ago, the FBI arrested an Iran-linked agent in New York for plotting to assassinate US officials. Iran is at war with the Jewish state on 7 fronts, but let's make no mistake here, Iran's real war is with America and with the West. Iran is not hiding its war on the US, Iran is saying this out loud. Hezbollah, Iran's proxy army in Lebanon, said explicitly, "This is not a war with Israel. Israel is merely a tool. Our real war is with America." Now, just yesterday, a US base in Iraq was struck by what the US Department of Defense says is an Iranian proxy, seriously injuring American personnel. And another Iran-backed proxy murdered US troops in a drone attack in Jordan just a few months ago. In the US, an Iranian agent was arrested only 2 years ago for another plot to assassinate a US official in Washington, D.C. And US officials warned that presidential candidates are at risk for Iranian attacks. Assassination wasn't Iran's only goal. In addition to political murder, the US also alleged the agent was also trying to organize protests in America. Now, just last month, America's Director of National Intelligence warned pro-Hamas protests in the US were being fueled and paid for by Iran. The US government warned that Iran is trying to stoke discord and to undermine American democracy, because Iran wants to destroy America, whom they call the Great Satan. Iran, remember, is the tyrannical head of the septupus behind the deadliest day for Jewish people since the Nazi Holocaust, October 7th, and attacks on Jewish people around the world. But let's make no mistake about who Iran's real target is. Iran is trying to tear America and the West as a whole apart. When Iran tries to destroy the Jewish state, remember, our safety is your safety. Our security is your security. Iran wants to hurt us in order to hurt you. Standing with Israel means standing up for yourselves and against Iran's dominance in the Middle East and across the world. And that's why the world must stand with Israel and against Iran's war. Because for Iran, the whole West is the target. Now, for Hamas, or what's left of it, Yahya Sinwar apparently is the target. He was announced as the new head of Iran's murder proxy in the Gaza Strip. Not that anyone has seen him recently. From his dark underground hiding place, Sinwar will now be officially in charge, since Hamas's previous boss came to an untimely end in an explosion in the Iranian capital. Now, to those in the West who pretend Hamas is anything less than a bloodthirsty, genocide-seeking movement, your fig leaf is gone. There was never a difference between Hamas's military branch, the rapists and murderers of thousands of innocents, and Hamas's political branch, the men in suits who ordered the rape and murder of thousands of innocents and signed the paychecks too, for good matter. No one claimed that Osama bin Laden was only the political leader of Al-Qaeda because he didn't happen to be on the planes themselves. If your country engages with Sinwar, your country is supporting terror. All of Hamas commits murder. All of Hamas must be designated a terrorist group, and none of Hamas should get your money. It's really quite simple. Don't legitimize murder. Don't try to save the murderers. Instead, do embrace the 3D plan. Destroy Hamas, demilitarize Gaza, and de-radicalize Gazan society. Any other option means promoting Hamas's stated plan. October 7th massacres again and again and again. This war cannot end with the hostages in Gaza or Hamas in power. Now, Israel's soldiers continue to hunt down Sinwar and his henchmen. Hamas yesterday fired off rockets at people in Israel, and they managed to launch them because they were using aid warehouses as cover, surprising to absolutely no one. Hamas continues to abuse protected spaces and to endanger civilians in Gaza for whom humanitarian aid is meant in order to try to kill people in Israel. Given the chance, Hamas will always try to murder Israel's children from behind Gaza's children. Israel warned civilians in the northern Gaza Strip to evacuate to safety ahead of action and to go after the rocket launches. And Israel will continue to break Hamas and to remove its ability to harm people in Israel. Now, just a message for all watching, for all those who are asking what you can do to help, you'll find links to our JGive campaign across our social media. Those donations honestly help us to keep getting the word out about what's really happening here in Israel and across the region. And as I said at the top of this piece, please like and subscribe. It really makes such a difference to help getting the word out to all those across the world and to help combat the lies and misinformation that are being spread about Israel across the world. All right, now let's take some questions from our audience watching live on social media.
Ed Barr on YouTube asks, can you comment on the CNN report claiming that Hamas is recruiting many more terrorists and becoming more extreme as a result of Israel's war against?
Well, I must say I take a little bit of umbrance and issue with the framing of that question. Hamas has always been extreme, and this is exactly what we spoke about here today. You know, the likes of Sinwar and others who have been in charge of Hamas for so long and who have been effectively orchestrating attacks such as October 7th on the ground really indicate the extremity of Hamas's approaches, the extremity of Hamas's tactics, and the extremity of Hamas in the region and across the Gaza Strip and certainly beyond, as we've seen. I mean, really, what more extreme can you get than the massacres, the murders, the rapes, the brutal attacks that we saw on October 7th and the extremities they have? Only now, as we said earlier, has that fig leaf been removed and Sinwar firmly planted as the sole head of Hamas now, the head of the snake, and people can really see for the first time the true colors of Hamas. You know, people spoke about moderating language, about negotiations before, but ultimately we're talking about moderation and negotiation with a terrorist army, an army that has been armed with thousands of rockets, with deep infrastructure buried amongst civilian infrastructure throughout the Gaza Strip, and has utilized the civilian infrastructure around it as a protection mechanism to defend their own extreme, aggressive, assaulting actions against Israel and against any others who would attempt to oppose them. So really, Hamas and their enablers as a whole have been extreme this entire time, and it's not that they're becoming more extreme because of any actions of Israel. They have always been since their founding and continue to do so, as we can see with the appointment of Sinwar as the formal head.
Ohad on Instagram asks, what is the state of the hostage negotiations?
Ohad, for the time being, it doesn't seem like there is significant movement when it comes to the hostage negotiations, but the goals remain clear as ever, that Israel will push to bring back all the hostages home and that they must do so now, because at the end of the day, that is the sole and clear goal. That is the one ray of light at the end of a very dark tunnel that could potentially try and see an end to the current status of the war and see a change to the status quo as it exists right now, with 115 hostages still held within the Gaza Strip, being held by Hamas and their allies. It is completely unacceptable to suggest that there would be any situation in which Israel would end actions with Hamas and end engagement with Hamas without the return of those 115 people. That is a message that we just must drive home again and again and again, because it is so clear. Return our people to us here in Israel. This is the key takeaway message. It doesn't matter who's in charge. As it stands with Sinwar right now, I guess that message is directed at him and his ilk. But at the end of the day, while he hides in his tunnels underground in Hamas, probably surrounded by hostages, that he's using as defensive shields, and if not, his own people and others in the Gaza Strip, innocent civilians who he's decided to protect himself with. As we've seen again and again, this is the clear goal, and it must move forward, and everyone must push for this. I would ask all of you out here listening today, wherever you may live around the world, push your leaders to support this action. The hostages must be returned. This is critical. There is no other way around it, and you must push for your leadership to fight for this action. Any dithering, any space, any idea that there will be a ceasefire without the return of the hostages is simply giving fuel to the fire of Hamas to continue fighting in a hopeless war that sees nothing but the death and suffering of more civilians on all sides. We do not want this. We want our hostages returned now, and that is the clear message I hope I can leave you here with today.
Sammy on YouTube asks, what is the PIJ and why don't we speak about them? Why only Hamas?
Sammy, thank you for Palestinian Islamic Jihad, another one of the militant groups, the Palestinian militant groups primarily operating within the Gaza Strip. Sammy, when it comes to these sort of questions and a matter, there's a framing that we often use. Hamas took control of the Gaza Strip after Israel's disengagement back in 2005 and have been the de facto government there ever since. They are directly responsible. They are the biggest power and the most responsible within the Gaza Strip, although, of course, as we often point out, a proxy for Iran, but they are the ones responsible for the actions that are going on here. PIJ, other smaller militant groups that may operate inside the Gaza Strip, of course, are important to understand in the tapestry and understand in negotiations. But at the end of the day, Hamas must be held accountable. They wish to be seen as some sort of governance structure. Well, if they hold the power, they hold the responsibility. And that is the key message that we take here. We focus on Hamas because we keep the message clear. We keep the parties that we're talking about clear. We speak to the likes of Yahya Sinwar and say to him directly, now you are in charge, you are responsible for returning our hostages to us and to help end this bloody and brutal war that nobody wants to see, that Israel did not start on October 7th, that Hamas and their ilk, working with the PIJ and others, did start on October 7th. Yes, all these factors are important, but at the end of the day, Hamas holds the power to end this by returning our hostages to us, and that is the clear and critical message.
Call Me Kimmy on Instagram asks, do you believe this is a religious war?
Kimmy, that's an interesting question, with a lot of subtext and conversation that we put into it. I would say that, in the wealth of thought and thinking and literature that exists out there, this framing of a religious war versus a war of civilizations versus others, there are a lot of ways in which people can frame it. But at the end of the day, I think the key point that we need to understand here is this is a war involving people, involving civilians, involving human beings, and that is what Israel is talking about. The 251 hostages that were taken on October 7th weren't taken because they were any particular religion. There were Bedouin Muslims, there were Thai workers that were taken there, or of course Jewish Israelis, among a slew of others that were taken there. They weren't taken because of their religion. They were taken because they chose to live in the nation of Israel, and that was their crime, according to Hamas, on October 7th. That was the crime that they had committed. This goes beyond any particular religion. This goes beyond any particular ideal. This comes to an idea that it is a criminal notion in the eyes of Hamas and others to be an Israeli, and that in itself is worthy of death. And that they would then use their own people, the people in Gaza, as human shields to protect that false, heinous, cruel ideology as they enact it across the region and across the globe and try and perpetuate that across the globe. We simply don't talk about a particular religion here. When I speak about Israel and Israelis, I talk about everyone. I talk about Jews, Muslims, Christians, the Druze community, Circassians, so many others that make up the tapestry of Israeli culture. Whether you be religious or secular, you are an Israeli citizen living here in the country and nation of Israel that has existed for the past 76 years, that will continue to exist into the future forever and continue. The fact of the matter is that this goes far beyond religion, and to frame it as such is to misunderstand the hateful ideology of Hamas, who are seeking ultimately genocidal goals of destroying Israel, destroying the Jewish people, and completely cleansing the area as they would have it of any notion of a state of Israel.
For our last question, Joanne on X asks, what do you think of the Olympics investigating Israel's medal-winning judoka for supposedly supporting the war with Hamas?
I think ultimately we should try and see the Olympics for what it should be. The Olympics was designed as an ideal to move us beyond the political, to move beyond the sort of petty squabblings that occur between nations, whether large-scale, small-scale, real or imagined. And the idea is that those in the Olympics should be able to freely participate wherever they may be from in the world. And certainly we've been so proud to watch our Olympic athletes from Israel perform so magnificently. We've seen athletes win gold. We've seen many medals won from Israel, and it is truly a fantastic story and one that we should applaud and laud. And frankly, if we're up to me, to move away somewhat from the world of politics so we can actually just enjoy the Olympics for what it is, an expression of unity, an expression of national pride, free from the sort of hang-ups, weights, and holdings that happen in everyday political squabbling in life. I wish that the Olympic ideal could always live up to that, and I wish that everyone in the Olympic movement, no matter what level or what place they come from, could simply have the chance to compete freely, to support those that they wish and that they love and care for, and to have a joyous and wonderful games. And I hope that that is the attitude that is perpetuated by all around. As I say, in any questions that come up regarding the Olympics, personally, my greatest internal debate is whether I choose to support Israeli or Australian athletes, sharing my dual identity as an Israeli-Australian. Here in Israel, it's always a tough one for me, I will say. Fortunately, both countries seem to be doing wonderfully on the medal tally. So for me, it's simply a joy to be able to watch these games there in France. All right, well, that is all we have time for here for today's daily briefing. As we always say, make sure to continue watching us every weekday. We're here at 3 p.m. Israel time. That's 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And please, as I've said earlier, but I'll say it again, like, subscribe, and share this briefing out with whomever you can, in whatever format you can. It really makes such a difference, and we're really starting to see our movement catch on, our community grow. It's something that's so important to us and something we wish to continue doing. But in the meantime, I'll say I'm Westropp-Evans. Thanks for watching.